Hello Internet, it's Elliot. Um, I wanted to do a little frequently asked questions video. So these are just a few common questions and concerns people have when interacting with or um, meeting someone who's transgender. So this is really basic, and if you already know quite a bit about being transgender, you probably can skip this one. Um, because it's just going to rehash some really basic stuff. So the first question is, what does transgender mean? And the simplest way to explain this is to say that what somebody was assigned at birth does not match up with the way someone sees themselves. Um, so, for example, in most countries, when a child is born, they're either designated male or female, and there's the understanding that they're going to grow up and totally rely on that label. But it doesn't always happen that way. People who are not people who are not transgender, um, who identify with what they were classified with at birth, are called cisgender. That's spelled C-I-S and then the word gender. And those are, you don't want to say like what the typical experience is. Typically people are cisgender for the most part. Although, there's a lot more transgender people in the world than most of us realize, because sometimes you don't even know that somebody's trans. And also there's just a lot more variation than what people typically think of when talking about being transgender, because transgender doesn't necessarily mean like, okay, I'm a guy and I want to become a girl. It's really not like that always. Sometimes it's, I was assigned female at birth, but I feel more like something gender neutral. For example, and that would be an underreported kind of, they're transgender too. Anytime it's not in line with, anytime someone's gender is not in line with what they were assigned at birth, they're considered transgender. And it doesn't really have an effect if it doesn't invalidate the definition if somebody does not go through with transitioning or does that transition in the way that people would expect. They're still trans. And, back when I was female presenting, I was still trans. I just wasn't acting on it. I just wasn't dealing with it, really. So that's one question. Another question that comes around a lot is how to refer to transgender people. Do you use it as an adjective? Do you use it as a noun? So people might say transgender man. That would be a correct usage because transgender is an adjective, not a noun. So you can't say someone is a transgender because that's a noun. Is a noun, and people are not transgendered. They're not a past tense verb. So adjective, yes. Average adjective, yes. Noun, no. Past tense verb, no. And that's something really important to remember. Another thing that I'm going to mention is the term transsexual. And this, in many languages, this is derivatives of transsexual are still the words that people use for transgender people. However, you have to be really careful when you use the word transsexual because not everyone who is trans is okay with that term, and people could get very offended if you use it. Also, it's a very outdated term at this point. So it doesn't look good if you use it. And I know you don't want to mess up. So if you care enough about the trans people in your life or the trans people you might meet, just please pay attention to the words you use. All right, so next question is, what's the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity? Now, very often we hear of the acronym LGBTQ stuff and other derivatives of that. The L, the G, and the B refer to sexual orientations, and not all sexual orientations, but a few of them, such as being lesbian, being gay, being bisexual. There are many, many more sexualities than that, but those are the ones that are in the beginning of that acronym. And the T stands for transgender. So the difference really is that your orientation is the sort of who you have a propensity to be attracted to. So if a woman is attracted to other women, she's lesbian. If a guy is attracted to other guys, exclusively, of course, he'd be called gay. And if, a woman or a man or any other, gender too, obviously, is attracted to multiple genders, then they're bisexual. So, you have both going on at the same time. Like, a trans guy can be gay. So, trans would be his gender identity, and gay would be his sexual orientation. So, that's kind of the way it works. I hope that makes sense. If anybody has confusion about that, feel free to hit me up and I will do my best to unconfuse you. So the next question is, what's the difference between sex and gender? Now, this is where things get weird, because a lot of people think that sex is male or female, and then gender is like also male or female, and that they're in line. They're not necessarily in line, because the way we look at sex is far more simplified than it should be. There's a lot more to sex than we really give credit to, because we only really recognize two sexes, male or female. When in reality there are many intersex conditions. There are people who have, a misalignment of, and a misalignment makes it sound bad, but it's not a bad thing. There are people whose chromosomes might say one thing, their chemicals in their body might say another thing. It's all very loose, and it's really hard to define it. But usually when people say sex, they're talking about male or female. What you were signed at birth is your sex. Whereas your gender would have to do with your gender identity. So if you were born assigned male at birth and grew up and felt like a man, then I guess, that kind of demonstrates the way that it works. It goes like that. And then, then you get people who are trans, and for example, perhaps there's another baby that's born, and this baby is assigned male at birth, and then goes on to find that she identifies as female. So sex is not a complete way of determining. Wait, no, way of determining. It's like throwing a little Terminator in there. Sex is not a good way of determining gender because gender is different. That's the best I can put it. Gender is very different. Gender is way more open-ended. Sex we don't understand very well. Now the next question is, what name and pronoun do I use for a transgender person? Now this is going to depend on that particular person. So you're going to have to ask them if they haven't told you. You know, you never know. They might be very open about it. I don't know. But if you're meeting a person and you want to know their pronouns, really just ask. You know, I don't think, you know, it's worth offending them, you know, to like not speak up. You know, because if someone's pronouns are not obvious to you, it's a good thing to ask. And the name that the person prefers is the name you should always use for them. And even when they're not in the room, still use that name and still use the pronouns that they use. You really have to be open to talking to people to get to know them and understand where they're coming from. Because there are a lot of people in the world who are transgender and you don't even know it. You know? And then there are people who you do know. And you should be respectful no matter what. Okay. Last question. What do FTM and MTF mean? Now these are acronyms that kind of cropped up. And they're a bit archaic at this point. But I will explain what they mean. Just so that, you know, let the record show that I explained this. Okay, so FTM stands for female to male, and so and you know, the idea of what they're saying is that this is somebody who was assigned female at birth, transitioning to male. And MTF, male to female, is the opposite. Someone assigned male at birth who's transitioning to female. So you have to be really careful when you use these because unless someone specifically identifies with these words, you could offend someone. And I don't think you want to offend someone. And if you've watched this far, I think you are the best, and I owe you like 50 cupcakes, and you can have a pet T-Rex. So claim that if you wish, if you've watched this far. And if you watched to the end of the video, I will give you a cute sloth that will be your friend. Okay, it's time for the end of the video. So thank you for watching. I hope this is a bit clarifying on terms that are used in the transgender community and by other people about trans people. Okay, so that's all. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your sloth. Bye.